tighten your lines as we get ready to sail the 7 seas on the Political Pirate Podcast. Join Captain Ted Yoho and the salty dog John Martin as they search far and wide for the greatest treasure of all, the truth. From local Florida news to nationwide stories and the globe beyond, we've got it all mapped out. Now here's your hosts, the salty dog John Martin and Captain Ted Yoho.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 3 Ps, the Political Pirate Podcast, with yours truly, the old salty dog, John Martin, and the captain of our pirate ship, none other than Ted Yoho. Ted, is it a little bit chilly in Welaka today?
It is nipply on the water here in Welaka. It was 29 this morning. Some reports were 27, which is unusual being on the water. It's normally warmer, but there was a heavy frost as you had in Hawthorne.
Yeah, we definitely, and I always tell my friends up north, turn off that dadgum fan up there.
Yeah, really. And the wind was blowing. You know, we came up from Port St. Lucie. I was down there visiting my daughter and granddaughter and son-in-law. And the temperature from Port St. Lucie at 1:30 was 84 degrees. By the time I got to Welaka, 3.5, 4 hours later, it was 47. So it was about a 40-degree plunge in that 4-hour drive.
I hear you. Well, we'll start off by saying to everybody, happy Martin Luther King Day. I mean,
absolutely.
One thing about it, when you live in a college town here like Gainesville, it's daylight and dark when the students aren't here, when the schools are closed. It's just a completely different town. But you know, what are your general thoughts about Martin Luther King Day and celebrating and everything? And I got a couple of very specific things that popped in my head, but just in general, share what you're feeling today about that.
Well, you know, you look back over the history of Martin Luther King, and keep in mind, I was born in 1955, and I grew up during segregation. We were like that movie with Denzel Washington, Remember the Titans. That was us. That could have been my high school. And so we grew up in a very turbulent time. So when Martin Luther King came on the stage, I was kind of resentful because, you know, I was 16 years of age and immature. As I progressed through life and had a lot more life lessons, I have a lot of respect for him and what he stood for and how he stood up at that time, which was a very tough time to bring people together. And his message that he spoke back then are more impactful, I think, today of uniting people. You know, that million-man march he had up there at Lincoln Memorial overlooking the reflection pond. I mean, that's something that is just so powerful. And his words that don't judge a man by the color of his skin, but the character of his heart. And, you know, those are messages that we all can learn from. And it is, you know, to me, it's the greatest attribute of America for somebody to come from a minority class like that to lead people to make it a better nation. That's what makes America great.
Yeah. And you know, one of the biggest differences just as far as how like protests, because they were very effective protests, but you can see the difference between, and I'm not trying to conflate the messages, but the difference between how Dr. King approached protesting and civil unrest, if you want to call it that, because there was some civil unrest, clearly, but it was a lot different in a sense. There were no paid protesters in those days, at least that you could detect. And the purpose of the protest was to bring a message to people and really kind of be the opposite of what's happening now with the violence and everything else. So it's funny how we're having a lot of so-called protests in the streets right now, but the whole spirit of how they're conducting it is totally different.
That was a very well organized protest of what they did. Peaceful protesting. Now, there were some violent clashes, I'm sure, but the ones today are organized for the wrong reason. They are organized today to tear our country apart. His may have looked for that group in time in history of tearing our nation apart, but it brought it together because it was a unifying message. These ones today, the protesters are on the wrong side. They're protesting to protect the people here that are illegal that came in under the last administration and the Obama administration. Actually, for the last probably 40 years, they've been coming in because Congress has failed to act on this. And what we're seeing today, and we talked about it on Friday, it's a cause and effect. What's going on today was predicated on the actions of the Biden administration. You know, when they let 11, 12, 15 million people, who knows what that count is, in here illegally, they adjudicated people at the border. They knew they were bad, but they turned them loose in the country. Now we're going around having to fix them. And they want to bash Trump for it. And again, it's just totally different, the protest today compared to what was Martin Luther King. We came out of that unified. Our nation became better and stronger after the civil rights protests, clashes, riots, and all that. We became a stronger nation. What they're doing now is not making us a stronger nation. It is dividing this nation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, to be fair, there were elements within the civil rights movement at that time that wanted to be violent and advocated violence, but Dr. King fought against that as well. You know, there were some definite big time disputes between him and different figures. And Dr. King fought against that because I believe he knew, and he kind of patted himself over Gandhi to a certain extent, that he knew that ultimately that would be the way to success, would be to peacefully protest and kind of demonstrate man's inhumanity to man. And that would reach the hearts and minds of people more than any kind of violent confrontation.
He really did. And, you know, he was ahead of his time in that, to be able to step out when he did. And, you know, you look at, I'm sure there were paid people in there trying to disrupt it, but I think there was people more on the anti-Martin Luther King side that were trying to disrupt that because they didn't want that movement. They didn't want acknowledgement of that we are a group of coming together as one. You know, the pluribus unum, the motto of our nation. They didn't want that. They wanted people divided. And unfortunately, I think, you know, if you look back, you know, J. Edgar Hoover had files on him. They wanted to harass him. And it was the people in our government that did not want this. So, you know, the government's probably as much, I don't want to say as much to blame, but they had a hand in there in some of the disruptions of that, instead of making, you know, working together and say, let's bring this message forward, because the end result is we'll be a stronger America.
Yeah, and also what kind of I've been thinking about over the weekend is, and in conjunction to a certain extent with Martin Luther King, is what we're hearing now about the polls, the idea of polling for things, you know, and really, if I was going back through various points in American history in my mind, that some of the greatest, if not the greatest achievements that we've had, if you did it based on polls, would have never happened, including the founding of the country, which I don't know exactly how they figure it, but they say only about 17% favored revolting against England. You know, how many people, if you polled the people, would have been wanting to end slavery? I mean, even World War II, the majority of Americans were opposed to us being in World War II until actually Pearl Harbor. So none of the great things that happened in this country, if you put it all on polling results, it probably never would have happened, because leadership, as I've said before, like my old daddy used to say, it's not taking people where they want to go, it's taking people where they need to be. And you can't do that based on polls.
No, polls are, I mean, we ran very few polls in our election and our campaign because, you know, you can make a poll say anything you want it to do. If you write the questions to screen people and get a response, you're leading people into the results. And so we didn't do those, but you're absolutely right. They can poll anything you want to lead you where you want to go, and it may not be for the right reason. Listen to the heartbeat of the people and work your tail off and unite those people in the direction you want them to go. And that's where we need to, you know, there's so much money in politics, and I'm going to, this little aside, there's so much money in politics to influence people to go the direction that the politicians or an entity wants people to go. All right. It may not be the right place to go, but they're going to use these numbers to poll. And so there's just too much money in politics to do that because they rely too much on that instead of getting the message to the people of really where they want to go. And if you talk to the people, you know where they want to go, you can lead them.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of segues into what I want to, our first story of the day, because it's kind of a continuation of obviously what we talked about on Friday. But there's a Washington Post report. I don't know how much faith to put in that. And I keep seeing this in various forms of fashion, although there's not really been any kind of official statement from the White House. But according to this Washington Post report, CBS News is reporting it as well, the Pentagon is readying 1,500 soldiers to possibly deploy to Minnesota, officials say. And, as part of the Insurrection Act, if the president invokes that. And he has talked about it, but has not to this moment actually done that. So what are your thoughts on that? If true, what are your thoughts on that, Ted?
Well, yeah, I read that too. And I saw that and where they're readying them to go up there. And I think at this point in time, when everything is so fractious, I should say, everybody's, at arms, they're ready to start fighting people up there. There already are people who have been killed. I think there's a moment in time where you just need to put a pause on it. Just back off. To go in there with troops right now when everybody's anger is boiling, I think it would be the wrong thing to do. I think what I would do is sit back, negotiate with Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, Mayor Fry of Minneapolis, and say, listen, this is what we're trying to accomplish. We want to do it with your help. We don't want to have to go down this route, but we are going to, move to get people out of here illegally. And we'd like to do it with your support because it would calm things down. But I think they need to put a pause before they put troops in there and try to realign the mission of what they're trying to do. Because if it happens there, it's going to start happening everywhere Trump is going in with the troops, Homeland Security and ICE going in there. And do we want pockets of Insurrection Act being put in like in Minneapolis, Chicago, LA, Oregon? And when they do that, more than likely they'll call martial law in those areas. And they'll have curfews and all those things. And we've seen that in the past, with hurricanes, where people were going in there robbing and looting, and they put curfews. I just hope that at this point in time, they take a pause, let the temperatures come down, and then work out an agreement that they can do together to accomplish the mission.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you on that, Ted. But here's where I know this how to be unfair. If Donald Trump, backs down, the press will not give him any credit for doing the right thing, so to speak. In other words, they're pushing right now that this is way over the top, he shouldn't do it, and all of that kind of stuff. But the second he were to back down, they would say, oh, it shows how weak he is and all that. So he's in a no-win situation when it comes to the press, for sure. I'm not saying that to disagree with anything you're saying, because I agree with you. Interestingly enough, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, has actually mobilized. Now, he's not activated them and put them on the streets, but he has mobilized the Minnesota National Guard for some idea of going in and protecting the people from ICE or something. It's kind of convoluted as to what, but he has actually done that. He did that on Saturday. What are your thoughts about that?
Anything Walz does is convoluted. That's my thoughts on that. But I wanted to drop back to what you were saying, the media. The media is our enemy. Very little in the media, the printed media, and less on social media, is telling the truth. I mean, they're spinning it to get their narrative around instead of just the facts. And Tim Walz, if he is doing this for the right reasons, which I can't believe he would be doing this to get immigration under control and the bad actors out. Anything they do at this point to decrease the level of temperature up there and the violence, I think is a good thing. But I would not trust him to say, okay, we're going to work with us to get these people out. I think, like you said, if he did this and Trump backed off, he'll say, see, Trump knew this was a bad plan, and so we talked him out of it. And then they'll continue to do what they've done. They have a mess up in Minneapolis. It's the same in Dearborn, Michigan, where you have these enclaves of immigrants that are wanting to form a country within the United States of America instead of assimilating. And so this is, I don't want to say a shot across the bow of how we're going to move forward, but I think this is something that we're all going to watch real carefully. And I think it needs to go back to rule of law. These are the rules of the United States of America. These are what we're going to enforce. And I think a better way for Trump to do is pull federal funding from them. I would pull every federal dollar I can until they adhere to the federal law and get on the same page that we want to make America stronger. Having illegal immigrants in the country that came in illegally that are breaking the rule of law and doing all these other things, eroding our programs like the social programs, education, food, the food stamps, all those things that they're doing. You get into Medicare, Social Security. Those things that these immigrant communities are doing illegally are ruining America, and they need to be stopped. And so that's kind of where I stand on that. If Waltz will work with that, that's great, but I don't trust him.
Yeah, well, I was going to play a couple of back-to-back videos, but I think maybe I'll pass off, and I'll just make the point that there's protests happening in the streets of Iran right now. And there's this one scene where they're charging and kicking down a fence, and of course they're being shot and everything else. And then there's protesters in Minneapolis that are doing the same thing. They're trying to kick down a fence at an ICE facility. It's actually a federal building, and ICE is protecting it because they're using it as a holding area. And, what kind of is the difference there, in a sense that you have? I mean, it's obvious that the people in Iran are trying to overthrow a tyrannical government, and they're literally putting their life on the line. And there's reports that as many as 12,000, between 5,000 and 12,000 have been killed. Very few, thank God, have been killed in Minneapolis. But you have, it's just, to me, it's odd to see almost the same scene for different reasons in our country and in Iran. I don't know, maybe I don't want to conflate the issues, but just to see that image is literally looking almost the same for different reasons is perplexing and puzzling and troubling to me.
Well, it really is. And I thought the same thing. It's a very fine line, for President Trump to say, there'll be consequences if you start killing people in your own cities. And then we have all the mayhem going in here. I think the difference, as you pointed out, is the people in like Iran or China or Hong Kong, where these protests go, these people are fighting for liberties and freedoms. And again, we've talked about the innate things that we've been programmed by our Creator. We want liberty, we want freedom, we want to protect our family, we want security for our family, and a better life in the modern societies. Not talking about caveman days, but in today's society. Whereas the protest going on in Minnesota is anti-government of a conservative government that's just trying to follow the rule of law. They're trying to disrupt it. These people do not like America. They want to bring America down. So they're really, in my mind, they're enemies of the nation, enemies of the state. Whereas over there, they're enemies of a theocracy that is suppressing liberties and freedoms. We're trying to give that to all people, but you can't give it to people that come into this country illegally trying to tear down this country, because it's tearing down the very fabric that made America what it is. And you get the AOC squad members, and you get the Tim Waltzes and the communist members that have been elected to Congress. Even though they don't want to wear that moniker, they run from it. But they're the socialist communists that are the future communists of this country. They're trying to tear down this country, and they don't fit here.
Absolutely. Well, another interesting thing that's happened.
Wait a minute. Let me
go ahead.
Thought here. it's not that they don't fit here. They're trying to live in a country that is a constitutional republic, but they want to be communist, a socialist communist. So if you want to live here, change the Constitution. The founders put in there that we can amend the Constitution and move forward. And I don't know if that process starts by these violent protests that they're having, but it's not gaining them any friends on the conservative side. I'll tell you that love this country for what it is.
Absolutely. And that also brings me, I'm glad you mentioned that, because if you look at the reasons why, whether you agree with the tactics of ICE and Donald Trump, so to speak, in that the problem was caused by the incompetency or the intentionality, which sometimes we talk about incompetence, but sometimes it's intentional. The flooding of the country with over 10 million, by any conservative estimate, of illegal immigrants that poured in this country literally almost overnight. And so I heard a discussion on the way in on Morning Schmo, by the way, so one of my services, so you don't have to. But they were talking about how President Trump and ICE, and of course they mentioned Stephen Miller, that there's this goal to deport or to arrest 3,000 migrants a day. That's what they want to do across the country. And that sounds like an ambitious goal, but if you stop and think about it, if you do the math on it, if you assume and I think it's a conservative figure, that there are 10 million people just in the last couple of years that came in illegally. Even if they were to hit 3,000, which they haven't even come close to that, they may have been near a third of that at one point. How long would it take to actually get all of those people out of the country? I mean, years and years and years. And President Trump obviously only has 3 more years in office. So it's ridiculous to think that they could solve that problem in a short period of time, especially when they don't have cooperation with these sanctuary cities that could stop the violence in a minute if they simply would let ICE come in and arrest and detain people that have already been arrested.
No, I agree with you. Couple comments. The incompetency of government. It was 100% the incompetency of Joe Biden, but it was 100% or 1,000% intentionally done by the Obama machine. Keep in mind, Obama wanted to fundamentally transform America. He has done that. And this was intentionally done by him through the incompetency of Biden, and they took advantage of that. And that's really, that in itself should be a crime, because the guy was a geriatric. He was mentally handicapped, dementia, and they took advantage of that. That's elder abuse. But 3,000 a day, there's 50 states, that works to 60 people a day per state. That's a doable goal. 50 states, 60 people per day, that's 3,000 a day. And the 11 or 12, 15 million, pick a number, nobody knows the accurate account. It would take, if you did 3,000 a day, 365, it'd be, about 1.2 million people a year at 3,000 a day. It would take you 15 years, 20 years to get the people out of here illegally. And you can't do that if your floodgates are still open. This is where Trump has been great at closing that. There's still people getting in, but they're a manageable number, not what we had under Biden. And, if we can keep that gate closed, and that's going to require Trump maintaining a majority in the House and the Senate. And so that's why we're on this program, to let people know that we have to keep the majority. You may not like what he's doing, some of the things he's doing, but for the country, from my perspective, it is the right direction we're going. And whenever you have the influx that we had and you make a mess of it, it's going to be a mess to clean it up, but it should be a temporary one. And the important thing is, and I appreciate the administration, they have a goal of what they're trying to accomplish. And if you have a goal, you can work towards that. If you don't have a goal, you're just spending time.
Yeah, well, you mentioned both Biden and Obama there. And what's interesting to me about the whole border issue and immigration, illegal immigration, is Biden literally said, as incompetent as he was, he literally said in that debate that if he's elected, they should surge the border. So that tells you all you need to know about intentionality. It was intentional to do that. But Obama is very subtle sometimes about how he does things. The media talks about the deportation under Obama, and the numbers were pretty high, but there's a huge difference. The numbers are conflated or inflated, depending on how you do that, use that math. They basically count as deportations people who were caught coming across the border and turned around. That's not really deportation. That's totally different. It's very different. Totally. Yeah, it's very different, Ted. I mean, even a dummy like me can see it, to say, okay, to turn somebody around at the border than it is to have to, when you have people by the bus load, the plane load, the train load, coming all the way up into Chicago, all the way up into New York, all of that kind of stuff, and then trying to get them out of there and put them back 2,000 miles across the border. There's just no comparison whatsoever.
No, and you brought that up, because they talk about, well, Obama deported more people than Trump did. No, they turned them away at the border because they didn't know what tactic to use, and they knew it was illegal to let these people in. So by turning them away at the border, they put that down as, let's put that in a deportation column. And it's political BS is what it is.
Absolutely. Well,
it's well formed.
Yeah, no doubt. The polling, yes, the polling. Government by poll, my God, if that's where that is kind of where we're at, and that's a sad thing. But I want to read one more little part, and then we'll go to commercial break. One development that happened on Friday is that the Department of Justice opened up an investigation of Governor Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Frye and others for what, according to this article, potentially conspiring to impede ICE and other federal law enforcement in Minnesota. Potentially now. I mean, they are clearly doing that. There's no question about that. Whether it should be investigated can be debated. But the idea that they're only potentially trying to impede ICE, they literally have stated that they're trying to impede ICE and called for people to impede ICE, to put their bodies between them and ICE. So, I mean, it's just, I don't know if they should be investigated or not, but this idea that they're not conspiring to stop ICE, to me, is ridiculous. What are your thoughts on that, Ted?
No, I think it's a good thing that they're going to investigate it, because if they have the investigation and it continues, then it gives more credence to doing the Insurrection Act, because you've investigated, gave them their day in court, their due process, and they are still moving forward and impeding ICE, which goes against national security. The number one goal of the federal government is to provide national security. And the number one goal for the governor of a state, it should be the security of his people. He is not doing that. He's playing politics with people's lives for a political agenda, and that agenda is to weaken America, and it has no place in this country. Change the Constitution if you don't like the way it is. You don't do it like this, Mike Waltz, or Tim Waltz. I'm sorry. Sorry, Mike. Are you an ambassador? I didn't mean that.
I hear you, Ted. Well, you bring up a great point there, because yes, a mayor, a governor should be primarily trying to secure the safety and welfare of the people within their state, within their city. And I think even though they're vocalizing that, if you actually look at it, they're literally calling for people to put themselves in harm's way, to confront these people and put them in danger. And the people that are, it's one thing to have these paid protesters, which I don't agree with, by the way, but they're doing it. They're literally kind of trained. But the lady, Ms. Good, that went up there, they encourage people like her to go up to the front lines, and they don't know what they're doing. And they create a situation where, unfortunately, the woman was killed. I mean, to me, you could lay that, if there's blood on the hands of someone that's political, it's not the ICE agent, and it is Governor Waltz and Frye, in my opinion.
Really is. And the governor up there, and all governors and all leaders of the state at the governor level down, should be working to make America more united, not dividing it. And it's just unconscionable. You see people like Gavin Newsom, Pritzker, the mayor and governor of Oregon and these other states, and Tim Walz, Kathy Hochul up in New York, really dividing the nation and going, instead of going back to our core values and our founding principles. And we all can agree that America is not a perfect state or nation. You know, there's some imperfections in it, but we should all strive to make it a better nation for the next generations, and they're not doing it.
Well, with that, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Please support our sponsors, and if you'd like to be one, look at the little tagline you'll periodically see that says "Contact Freddie." Make that call because we need you. Take us to break, Ted.
No, I think we look forward to talking to you when we come back, and we got some international stuff and stuff on the big scene that we need to talk about. So we look forward to having you back. Appreciate you being sponsors, and God bless.
On April 7th, 2025, Gator Nation reached the mountaintop as Florida won the national championship in basketball. Now, relive every thrilling moment with Franz Beard's new book, The Golden Season, the unforgettable story behind Florida's historic 2025 title run. Feel the passion, the drama, and the glory all over again. Available now at Spurriers.com. Click the shop tab. That's Spurriers.com.
Well, there you saw that advertisement. Franz Beard, a great sports writer that is one of the sponsors of the show, and he's written a book. He's written several books, but and they're all great. I haven't read this one, to be honest with you, but I will soon. And it's about the road to the championship that our Florida Gator men's basketball took to win the national title, one of the great runs in college history. And
that was a great season in that game. I won't forget that game. That was a cool game.
Yeah, and Franz, no better person to cover that than Mr. Baird. So anyway, let's move on to some international and national things at the same time. Ted, I titled this "Greenland or Bust" because we were going to talk about this Friday, but we kind of ran out of time. But I'm kind of glad we didn't because it's a developing story because Trump has come out now, President Trump, and said that he's going to impose a 10% tariff starting February 1st, I believe, and then against several, mostly NATO nations, European nations, and the EU basically. And if that tariff doesn't kick in enough for them to give up Greenland, then it's going to go to 25%. What are your thoughts on that part of it, and just in general about the idea of taking Greenland either by hook, crook, or whatever, and the importance of it all? Just give me your overall view of where we're at with that right now, Ted.
I don't have the information that the administration does, but we've talked about the impending, civil war here in the United States, and we're, seeing how these conflicts, like in Minnesota, can be the shot at the Concorde, the one across the bow. But on an international level, I've talked about the tectonic shifts in world power have been rumbling to change hands and set a new world order, and China is the one that wants to do that. So I don't know what they know that I'm not privy to, and I'm sure it's a lot. But when you look at what's going on with Greenland, the way Trump is doing it with these tariffs, to have relationships, you want to draw people into you. What he is doing is pushing people away, and they're starting to look at China as a more, I don't want to say a more favorable partner, but one that has more certainty in the future. They know what China's goal is, and but they know it's not going to change weekly, monthly. 10% tariffs, 25% tariffs, no tariffs. 15% because, you said something that Trump was offended by. And I think this is a point in time where his cabinet and his advisors need him to back off. And if he doesn't, what he's going to do is drive a wedge between the NATO allies, the NATO organization, that National Alliance of the Treaty Organization that was formed in 1949 after World War II, that has been responsible for not having another world war. If we drive a wedge in that, it weakens that alliance. That weakened alliance empowers Russia, and we're already seeing Russia is celebrating this divide between the NATO allies, and it empowers China, it empowers North Korea, because they'll say there is no counter to what we can do. And, I think it's a misstep by Trump. We don't need to go in there. There was a treaty signed in 1951 from Denmark, I think it was under Truman, that allowed the United States to use Greenland for national security and to bolster the NATO allies. So I think these tariffs, to get back to your point, I think it's just flaming dissent and weakening America in the process and our national security.
Well, a couple of points that you brought up there. One, you talked about China. Well, an interesting thing that happened over the past week, and Trump made some interesting comments about it, but the Prime Minister of Canada was actually in China for several days this last week. And apparently, I don't know all the details, but apparently him and Xi have, I'm sorry?
Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping, X, he's X or whatever, right? That they've come to some type of trade agreement with Canada.
Right.
The details are yet to really be totally announced, but Trump kind of flipped that off, saying, "Oh, yeah, well, they need to do that." But so there's already signs of that, and then it's interesting to me because I don't think that Trump really is going to invade Greenland. I could be very wrong. But one thing about Donald Trump as a businessman, he always starts any kind of business dealing with the most drastic thing. He doesn't start in the middle and work to it. He starts with the most extreme. Well, this is what I'm proposing. And then they back off and everything. They come to some agreement. So I actually think that's probably what he's doing. But it's very clear that Greenland is extremely important for protecting our northern flank, basically the whole Golden Dome or Iron Dome or whatever they're called, Iron Dome, I guess, theory of protecting us from missile attack would be centered somewhat around Greenland. So it is of critical importance militarily, and it apparently has a lot of minerals and all of that kind of stuff in it too. So I don't know that Trump is going to carry through with all this. I do believe he's trying to get the conversation serious about it myself.
No, I agree with you. It is a very strategic point. There's a couple treaties that China's not a signatory of. One is the Arctic Circle Compact of nations around the Arctic Circle. What that means is any nation that, I got a world map up here I'm looking at, any nation that encompasses the Arctic Circle on landmass to the ocean, they have claim to the Arctic Circle. Well, Denmark, being as huge as it is, they've got a tremendous amount of land space that goes around that. And we've got Alaska, pretty much is all we have. And China wants to make claim to that, but they're not a Arctic nation. They claim near Arctic nation. So they have a desire and they want to push into that. And they're buying up ports around Norway and Finland and all that so that they can have a claim to the Arctic Circle for mainly it would be for security for them and to be able to launch missiles and attack the United States of America. And they also want the resources up there too, the fisheries, the oil, the minerals, as you brought up. And it would be a disaster for them to be up there. So from that standpoint, national security, Trump is absolutely right. But he's already accomplished, the United States has already accomplished that with the alliance we have with NATO. And keep in mind, Article 5 of NATO says that if one NATO nation is attacked, it's an attack on all of them. In this instance, we would be the outlier, and they would respond by standing up to America. Whether that would go into a war or not, I don't know. But there's no need to buy Greenland. We have the treaty compact that was done in 1951, where we can put bases on there. And think of the strength we would have if the NATO alliances, which Trump, I give him a credit to, that he got them paying from 1% to 2% or 0.5% up to 5% into the NATO. So they're very well funded to bring that alliance and that organization, NATO, as a backstop to Russian or China aggression or any other nation in the future, that alliance would stay very strong. And I think we're stronger by being a part of that than being the sole owner of that and having to fund it all by ourselves. So I just think it's a misstep on his foreign policy. And I've been very critical of his foreign policy in the past. But again, I'm going to qualify that with I'm limited in information I have from the national intelligence side. But I do go to Washington and I talk to a lot of people. And I privy to a lot of things that other people aren't. And I think it's a misstep.
Yeah, well, they keep talking about NATO as if Donald Trump, and I don't disagree with what you're basically saying, that if we were to actually attack, it could destroy the NATO alliance and trigger some war about that. But at the same time, the media does not want to seem to give credit to Donald Trump for actually making NATO, saving NATO really, and making it stronger than ever. And they talk about, we've had this great relationship with Europe for over the last 75, years and all of that kind of stuff. And I got to thinking about this, Ted, on the way in here, and maybe you'll get a kick out of this because you and I have not really had any disagreements. But, I'm assuming that if we don't always agree on every issue. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you and I had, had a bunch of disagreements, if they come up in the future, if you just give me like $100,000 a year, I'd be very pacified. It would very much improve our relationship. Sure. If you would just give me that $100,000, I'd feel much more secure.
Sure.
But isn't that basically what we've been doing for the last 75 years? Giving them money, basically?
We have, but see, that stuff can be renegotiated. And Trump did that with South Korea. And like you said, he gave South Korea a terrible deal in the beginning, and they were all up in arms. But we stayed in that compact. They're our sixth largest trading partner. And you should work at making your alliances stronger because it is a stronger deterrent for countries like China or Russia. China or Russia, we all agree that, and Putin even said it, he would not have invaded Ukraine had Trump been president. But he saw a weakened, incompetent president of the United States, and he took advantage of that and went in there. If we weaken the NATO alliances, Putin is empowered and he's going to do more. And that's why those countries along, the Baltic countries that border Russia have pulled out of the landmine treaty and putting in landmines. That's why NATO has bolstered their spending. That's also why Japan has bolstered their spending. You may remember the discussion I had with the Japanese legislator that talked about, the presidential election. He said it didn't matter who won. What mattered was who was going to unite the United States, because what they saw around the world is a divided states of America. And if we're divided, we're weakened. And if we're weakened, they're in jeopardy, they being Japan, of being invaded by China. And that's why Japan has moved from, after World War II, they could have a military, but it was only for humanitarian and defense. They changed that to where they can have first strike capabilities, and they've increased their spending on defense to over 2%, because China's already making claims that they're going to, once they go into Taiwan, they're going to move on the islands that Japan claims are there that China claimed. And it automatically, if China moves on Taiwan, it brings Japan into a war, and that automatically brings us into a war. So that NATO alliance is very important that we make it stronger, not drive a wedge into it.
Yeah, well, I don't know if our producers put it up yet or not, but if you hadn't, we can. If people are wondering why Greenland is so important to the defense, this kind of little section of a map shows you it literally is like a continental or a country aircraft carrier in the middle of the potentially hottest zone that could be up there. So it kind of explains that, and I think he's put it up there now to check it out. It shows, because Greenland really is at the center of any kind of defense of the Arctic. And if you look at where all the countries are positioned right there, there's probably no other spot on the globe that has all of the East, the West, all that together than in the Arctic region right there.
No, I think that's a great picture if they can keep it up there for a minute. To look at how much land mass Russia has. China, if you look in the top right quadrant where that brown line is with a little bit of yellow on it, that's China. Look how far they're removed from the Arctic Circle, yet they want to claim near Arctic Circle countries. So they want to have the claim to the minerals, the fisheries, and all that. And then you look at where we are with Alaska, that's the only claim we have to that area. And so Denmark is very strategically important. And keep in mind, John, that during World War II, Germany occupied Greenland. After they invaded Denmark, they went to Greenland. So it is strategic. We have had foreign adversaries there. And again, the NATO alliance is the one that needs to protect that. That way, we're not doing it all by ourselves.
Absolutely.
Keep in mind, $38 trillion broke.
Well, the EU has sent some level of troops over there, or are sending. I don't think it's any kind of big, combat force. But President Trump said the other day that Greenland when he was asked about this, he said they've increased their defense from 1 dog sled to 2 dog sleds. I mean, Trump, man, he's something else. But I came up with this, that if true, Ted, if they've doubled their defense by dog sled, then Donald Trump has a secret weapon that I want to play this video of Donald Trump's secret weapon. Check this out.
Why do I love these wide open spaces? They remind me of why our forefathers came here. Not just for its beauty, but for the freedom only America provides. I'm Kristi Noem. From the cowboys who tamed the West, to the titans who built our cities, to the dreamers who chased the impossible, America has always rewarded vision and grit.
Ted, that's one of those jokes, if you know, you know. Kristi Noem, she could take out some dogs. She's admitted that herself. So put her up there. We don't need to send troops. We just send Kristi Noem on horseback and maybe a couple helpers, and I think it'll all be solved.
Yeah, Tom Homan, send Tom. I would not want to cross that, man. Let's see, where were we? Anyways, Greenland. We're going to see how. I know where I wanted to go. So you think of the distraction of Minneapolis, and I don't want to say it's not important, but you look at Minneapolis, you look at this argument, the time and the oxygen being spent on Greenland, and then you have Venezuela and the drug boats. We have that, but what are our real threats? It's debt, it's China, immigration. Trump has got under control for now, but it could go away in the next election. And so we need to move beyond these distractions, and we should be working, because we can't carry the defense of Greenland by ourselves. Let's bolster the alliance we have with the NATO partners, work with Trump, what he's already done by getting him to increase spending, and build trust and certainty in our allies, because Japan's worried about us. The European Union's worried about us. I mean, Germany put in $1 trillion in spending in military, and they're also lending money to the other EU members because they are worried, and they're not sure if they can count on us. And this is what the Japanese legislators told me. They said, we're not sure we can count on you. And the defense.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, there are some people, Ted, who think that the gravest threat to America right now are white liberal women, but that's another story.
Well, you know what?
Go ahead.
No, I think you're right on that, because it's that mindset that people like that have, because they are anti-American, and that's causing that political divide in here. And I'm going to rewrite my
hostility and inhumane sanctions imposed by the United States and its allies. Ted, are you back?
I am back.
Yeah, I was just touching. I had switched gears on. Yeah, I can hear you. I'd switched gears talking about what's happening in Iran, because the president basically of Iran came out and said that the United States is really to blame for everything in the streets. That between us and Israel, we're the ones that created it all.
Sure.
Every reasonable person knows that's nonsense. But First of all, how important, this is, I guess, conclude with this, because I'd really like to hear yours. How important would a peaceful Iran mean for the region and the world? I mean, and what should we do to get there? Because I think that the key to peace, if there is going to be a lasting peace in the Middle East, which I'm not convinced there is, but if there is, it really centers around a peaceful Iran. Because if Iran is any way, shape, or form like it has been for the last 50 years, there's not going to be any lasting peace there.
No, there won't be. Let's look at utopia. No nations fight. War is illegal. Nobody can fight. Look at where money would be spent and invested in. It'd be research and development, moving humanity forward. But that's not the world we live in. A peaceful Iran, that's never been there in my lifetime. It would matter more to the people of Iran that they could have the liberties and freedoms and opportunity to really pursue making it a better society. You know, who wants to raise their children and say, hey, you're going to be in the IRGC, you know, the Iranian National Guard. That's what my goal for you is, you know, to be, you know, a thug for the theocracy. I don't think any parent wants their children to do that. And it's the mindset of the theocracy that is suppressing the people, and that's why you're having a protest. You know, and it's the same like in North Korea. I mean, there is no dissent up there because they kill them right now. Same in China, the very little dissent. In Cuba, any of these repressive regimes or autocratic regimes or the communist ones. And the people of Iran would benefit the best, but not only that, but then the region would too, and we would. So let's hope that they can pull this off this time.
Yeah, and a lot of people have been throwing up ideas that, oh well, what we did in Venezuela, we should do in Iran. They're just totally different situations, totally different. I mean, just a couple real quick. Venezuela is basically a unified society in general. They have the same essential religious beliefs, and so there's a difference between the fundamentalist religion people and maybe even fundamentalist communists, so to speak. And then the other big thing is if you look at the neighborhood, you're talking about dealing with ungodly amounts of money with the Arab world. And then you got to throw Israel in the middle of that picture and all the animosity that's been them. There's really no comparison between Venezuela really and Iran as far as the solution to it, really.
Right. I mean, the old guard in Iran, they knew freedom somewhat, and they knew a free society back when the Shah was there, and I think he left in the 70s. And you look at Venezuela, that was a free society until Hugo Chavez came in the 90s, the mid to late 90s. And so they have memory of what a free society was, whereas the people living in Iran now, especially the younger generation, don't know anything different than what they see right now. So Venezuela is a different story. And so it would be easier to go back into that for what you were saying. They're a Christian nation. It was a very wealthy nation, and they've been blessed with a lot of resources. And I would think they would want this back and help to bring in a stable government. Iran, it's a building process from the ground up because so many people don't really understand what a free society was like. And so, you know, let's just hope these things work out. But I agree with you. To go into Iran, how many times have we gone into an Islamic country to bring in peace and give peace? It has to happen from within. And so any way we can support the protesters and the civilians that want freedom in there and work with the groups that want it for the right reason, not some nefarious outside organization that just wants the dissent in there, somebody like a China that would like the conflict to go on because we would get involved and it would weaken us. I think we need to stay out of that and support the people that are doing it for the right reasons, if that makes sense. And that was kind of rambling.
Yeah, well, I think that the Abraham Accords and the spirit of that is the only real lasting potential solution there, because if the Arab states don't want peace and prosperity, I'm not saying they don't, but if they don't want peace and prosperity, there will not be peace and prosperity, regardless of what the United States want and regardless of what Israel wants. It's up to the Arab nations, and they're not as unified because they have splinter groups. They're all afraid of each other at some level.
Sure.
So to me, unless the Arab group buys into the Abraham Accords or something like that, there won't be a peace there, any lasting one.
You just brought up a great thing. The Abraham Accords was a foundational building block to bring peace to the Middle East. And Trump did a fantastic job on that to bring the countries together. That was something you build on. And contrast that to NATO. NATO was brought together after World War II to build lasting peace. We want to make it stronger, not fracture it and splinter it, to weaken it, to empower people like Russia or these other nations. And so I think that's a great comparison, and why NATO is so important. We should work to make it stronger, as we should to make the Abraham Accords, and let that accord bring that peace to that area. I mean, they're more like-minded, to bring Christian nations in there and say, hey, this is what you should do, this is how you should think, would only drive a wedge in there. Let the nations that are invested in that region be the ones that are driving it, provided they're working for peace and trade. And, we're just a more peaceful world. I was going to say society, but everybody has their own society.
Well, we're going to end it on that note. That was a very positive way to end it, and that's why you're the captain of our pirate ship. We hope you enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. You like what we're doing, share what we're doing far and wide. We need sponsors in order to keep going. So if you'd like to be a sponsor or know somebody who would, point them in our direction. We'd greatly appreciate it. Take us out, Ted.
Yeah, exactly what John said. Share this message in our podcast with your email list. Send it out with your social media people. And, let's spread this word, because what we're doing, we're trying to get this message out to bring, stability, I guess, to the world at this point in time, but not just the world, but here in America, because that leads to prosperity in the future for all of us. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you later, and we'll see you on Friday.
Peace out.